the insects. They also found in this study that when they found dead bee bodies, it contained the neonicotinoid insecticides in their body at sufficient deadly levels.
Well, that proves
and they
it.
found pollen that was in the hive that had systemic levels, so that could create chronic exposure. So it's not just acute, but chronic over time, where all of the bees in there could eventually lose the ability to find their way back to the hive potentially.
Well, see, Jeffrey, this is where it becomes really serious. We're talking about crimes against nature. We're talking about crimes against humanity. If you destroy the pollinators, you destroy the viability of human civilization. People don't realize these honeybees pollinate, what is it, about a third of every mouthful of food that you eat on the dinner plate.
Exactly.
Without honeybees, the food supply collapses. We have serious problems on this planet if this is allowed to continue. And you just described there a lot of information that I hadn't heard before, the mechanism for how that actually is killing the honeybees. That's shocking.
Yeah, earlier there were studies that show that there was secretions of liquid in the plants that form beads on the plant in the mornings, and then the tired bees, after fanning the hive all night, will go and get their earliest level of nutrient. They'll go to the nearest plant and drink the nectar, and then they'll not find their way back to the hive. But this is even more significant because they actually found bees that had died with neonicotinoid insecticides in their bodies. The neonics also reduce the immune system defenses against a viral attack. It's also true that a study found that when bees were gathering pollen from GM corn, from BT corn, which is designed to break open the stomach of insects and kill them, it doesn't break open the stomach of insects necessarily, the bees, but certain other types of insects. The bees that were gathering pollen from the GM crops ended up with viral infections, and the controls did not, suggesting that their immune system became compromised. So that may explain why there's more colony collapse disorder in the US than there is overseas, where GMOs are planted less.
That's right.
So it could be a perfect storm.
Yeah, a perfect storm for death. I mean, widespread death and starvation. I mean, isn't it just stunning that these corporate scientists are so greedy and so blinded by their own arrogance that they will literally compromise the future of life on our planet just so they can make a quarterly profit? I mean, how sick is that?
And the lies are blatant and very often in the details. For example, Bayer's scientists said that bees don't collect much pollen from corn, but in the study it found that up to 50% of the pollen collected by the bees were from corn when the corn had pollen. So they're just making things up.
Yeah.
They just make up assumptions, and we see this all over the place. I have caught them, 100, 200 times making up assumptions which are either blatantly false or never tested, or eventually tested and found to be false.
Well, that's called science, Jeffrey. You make up whatever you want. It gets published in a scientific journal. All the scientists say it's true. They just make it up. They invent it. I mean, how many pharmaceutical researchers have been caught just completely fabricating their results? And some of them did it for 20 years before they finally got busted. I mean, it's sick. But anyway, I don't mean to interrupt you. I can't stay silent about this. We got a few more minutes in this segment. What else do you need to cover in this segment, Jeffrey?
Well, two more stories about herbicides. Roundup, it turns out, is far more toxic and more pervasive and more dangerous than anyone had believed before. There's a new organism that may be associated with the spraying of Roundup or Roundup-ready crops, and this organism is able to kill a fetus and a pregnant chicken within 24 hours. It may be responsible for a widespread epidemic we're seeing in the inability of livestock to maintain their pregnancies. It's found in high concentrations of crops that have been diseased and associated with Roundup spray. So this is one of the possible reasons why the Roundup-ready crops may be causing reproductive disorders. Another is that Roundup chelates and binds with nutrients, making them unavailable to crops and to livestock. So there's widespread nutritional deficiencies in U.S. livestock.
Wow.
And some of those nutritional deficiencies can affect the ability to have babies or the health of those babies. So, for example, one of the most important nutrients that's made unavailable is manganese. And they found that 63% of the stillborn calves had deficiencies in high levels of manganese. Also, there was a very large percentage of the stillborn, the birth defect calves that had lack of manganese. And there's basically a universal deficiency of manganese among the conventional livestock population. And that's just one of many, many nutrients. So that's a second possible reason why Roundup may be causing reproductive problems. And the third is that Roundup itself is directly toxic. It can kill human placental cells. It interrupts the estrogen cycle. It can cause abnormal and decreased levels of sperm, and it can cause birth defects. So we're having a problem right now with reproductive health in humans and animals. And Roundup is so omnipresent. It's found in the urine of people who live in the city. It's in a U.S. Geological Survey in the Midwest. It was found in either up to between 60 and 100% of all samples collected in the air, water, and rain. It's found in surface waters. It was just found in a Spanish study for the first time in the groundwater there. So it's basically omnipresent. It's even found in the blood of North Americans, and it passes through the placenta into the blood of the fetus. So this is another one of Monsanto's gifts to the world, like PCBs before, which is found in the blood of polar bears. Now Roundup is everywhere, and it can be causing reproductive disasters in the populations.
Well, what's astonishing is that the people who are promoting Roundup don't know any of this information, and I'll give you a personal example of this. You know, I'm hanging out on a ranch in Austin or near Austin, and we had a consultant come out who was educated at Texas A&M, which is not the most organic educational institution in the country, and he comes out and notices we have a 20-acre field that's got the wrong kind of grass in it, a non-native grass. And we said, well, how do we convert the grass over to native grasses? He says, oh, that's easy. Just spray Roundup on all 20 acres. And they say this every day to everybody all across Texas. I mean, people are spraying chemicals and a lot of Roundup left and right like you can't believe, Jeffrey.
I know. In fact, the incidence of Roundup is increasing so much because of the herbicide-tolerant weeds that the incidence of herbicide use in the study showed that it was up 31% in the last of the 13-year study, 31% in a single year. But what's also happening, and this leads to the last piece from this month, is that it's forced farmers to switch to acutely toxic chemicals like 2,4-D, which is a component of Agent Orange.
Yeah.
And in the making of 2,4-D, you can have dioxins, which are also linked to birth defects. It turns out one of the ways that the industry, now this is bizarre. We started out with like truth beyond fiction with the mosquitoes. This is equally as ridiculous. The way that Dow Chemical wants to solve the problem about herbicide-tolerant weeds that are resistant to Roundup is, and the USDA is ready to approve it, corn and soybeans that are resistant to 2,4-D.
Right.
So you can spray the entire field with 2,4-D, causing an environmental and health catastrophe in order to allow Dow to sell more of its seeds and its 2,4-D chemicals.
Hey, it's like being air bombed in the Vietnam War with Agent Orange, except they're going to do it right here in America in our backyard. I mean, that's how crazy it is. Wasn't 2,4-D? That's about 50% of Agent Orange, isn't it?
Precisely.
That's insane. I mean, it used to be a chemical warfare ingredient. Now it's agriculture. This has got to stop. And I know you're doing some great work, the most important work, Jeffrey, on the front lines to stop this. And let me just give a message to the folks watching. If you want to help stop this, support Jeffrey's organization, the Institute for Responsible Technology. That's at responsibletechnology.org. Jeffrey, is there any other website or book name you want to give out?
Well, responsibletechnology.org is a way that you can sign up for our free electronic newsletter, watch free videos and audios online, catch a lot of articles. But if you want to learn to avoid genetically modified foods, go to nongmoshoppingguide.com and look at thousands of products that have been verified by the Non-GMO Project, a third-party verifier, to back up non-GMO claims. So if people avoid GMOs, and there's enough of us, even 5% of the US population, it should be sufficient to create a tipping point, as happened in Europe, so that the food companies realize that using GM ingredients is a marketing liability and will kick it out.
Absolutely. Well said. That is the pathway to victory. And Jeffrey, you are an American hero for your work. I want to thank you so much for doing what you do and for joining us here today on naturalnews.com. Folks, thank you for watching. Jeffrey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, that's our interview with Jeffrey Smith. Be sure to check other segments, other interviews with Jeffrey on tv.naturalnews.com. Also, you can search for them on youtube.com. We've got more coming up with Jeffrey Smith about the GMO labeling campaign effort in California. That video will be posted separately. Thank you for joining me today. This is Mike Adams, the Health Ranger for naturalnews.com.